Content warning. This episode of What the Trans features discussions about suicide, drug overdose, and violence against transgender and gender diverse people. If you or somebody you love is struggling, contact the Trevor Project by texting START to 678-678, calling 1-866-488-7386, or going online to thetrevorproject.org. You are not alone, and you are loved. Always. Welcome to What the Trans US edition, episode 2. I am Alyssa Steinzik.
I'm Valeriya Martindale.
And I'm here to ask you the most important question. If a woodchuck could chuck wood, how many pecks of pickled peppers could Peter Piper sell with his platonic life partner if she sells seashells by the seashore?
Oh, we're getting into market dynamics here. Is there any kind of shortage in the area, or...?
They've done absolutely no market research.
Oh, they're selling nothing then. Let's go!
Hell yeah. Correct answer. I would have accepted any answer because all truths are valid. Just kidding. So, what have you been up to in the interim 2 weeks between our first episode and now our second episode?
Well, as you may have heard, not that you were included in any way, of course, but we did a little bit of streaming this past Sunday. That's occupied a lot of my time, mentally and otherwise, just because it's something that I've both loved doing and dreaded. Yeah.
Yeah. It looms heavy in my mind, like all things that involve doing stuff.
Oh, yeah. The anticipation is always the worst part, and then you get into it, and it's just a wonderful time. Alex is a lot of fun to hang out with. You were also there.
Yeah, I was present. Not accounted for, though. But yeah, it's the ADHD thing, right? Like, I've got to do something today. I can do nothing until it is done.
Waiting mode is just
possibly doom scroll on Twitter. I'll do that sometimes because I have to. We talked about this not too long ago, one-on-one. I've got my work system when I have to do work. Write something like this script or my column for assigned media or whatever. Those work days, because I have so much trouble getting started on the thing, I pretty much have to force myself to do it, and I can't do anything else. So, like, I'll eat, I'll take, bathroom breaks and stuff, and then I'll write, and I'll kind of zone out a bit and maybe, like, listen to music or, like, scroll on Twitter for a few minutes, and just kind of, like, that's my whole day. Just interspersed work and, like, doom scrolling, but nothing of substance beyond that. Like, I'm not watching a TV show or playing a game or talking to anybody. I'm just focusing on that, because if I get distracted for a single second, it's over.
It drives me insane, too. I'll have days where I'm just like, I have to do something in 4 days, and I'm already freaking out about it, and I have to sit here for 3 days doing nothing and feeling like I'm wasting time. It's the most ridiculous mental roadblock.
The guilt factor, where it's like, I could be being productive. And then you're like,
I could be an astronaut right now. Wait, no, I couldn't.
What are you talking about? I have to constantly, like, reassure my nervous system and be like, you've done what you can. You can't do any more. Just stop feeling the way that you're feeling, because it's useless.
Well, when you're not avoiding avoidance, what have you been doing?
Well, of course, and you're also very hyped for this.
Please let it come out.
So Val and I are both big ol' nerdy dweeby gamers. If you're a trans femme listening to this podcast, big mood, right? We're waiting for, and we're recording this the day before it comes out. We're waiting for the release of Dragon's Dogma 2, which is a big action RPG from Capcom that we both fell in love with the original game like 12 years ago, and they finally seen fit to release a sequel that looks really damn cool. So we're both waiting with bated breath for that to come out.
I've been trying my damnness not to be spoiled, and it's so hard. Like, with any release now, everything has trailers and things that over-explain beyond what I want to know. So I've just been twiddling my thumbs and trying to hide for the past month and a half.
I will tell you that their advertising campaign has been super weird. We know like so little about this game. You've only really been under threat of serious spoilers in the last like week when people started getting the game early, physical copies, you know how that happens sometimes.
I think there were a couple of Walmart leaks specifically.
Yeah, I saw one really great post where somebody, I guess they had stocked the game early at Walmart and somebody took it up to the front and it wouldn't ring up. And he was like, but then I just acted kind of confused. And the lady at the register was like, whatever, and put it in manually. I just love that, just being like,
I don't know
why it wouldn't.
That's the weirdest thing.
Like, and he knows exactly when this fucking comes out.
If he's posting in the subreddit,
he's just there to buy it earlier. Oh, yeah. Yeah. So that, been playing some Helldivers 2. Everybody's into that. We're thinking about doing some Helldivers streaming this Sunday, which, you know, you will already know whether or not we've done that by the time this comes out.
Call us liars on Twitter if you want.
Yeah, possibly. That's fine. I don't care. We might play Lethal Company instead. Who knows? But we're hoping to try to do those like kind of every Sunday that we can. Mm-hmm. You know, maybe the day will shift. Who knows? But right now we're kind of looking at like weekly streams just to like play some games and hang out because shockingly we all like each other. The myriad co-hosts of What the Trans. We enjoy spending time together, and we like when people from the Discord come in and hang out with us. So yeah, look forward to that. You know, certainly not the main focus of What the Trans, which is what we're going to dive into right now. News about trans people. Excellent transition. Give me money for that. Send me $5. Venmo me $5 right now. So, up first on the agenda, we're going to talk about, shortly, in brief, an update on anti-LGBTQ legislation in the States. I think we mentioned this in our first episode, but we're probably going to have, this is going to be a recurring thing where we just have to talk about some new bill that's either passed or updated from what we've talked about previously. It's not going to be too heavy, but it's probably going to be in like every episode because they just do not stop legislating against us right now.
I would really love if we got a break, but this is a pretty rough time to be trans in the United States, as anyone knows.
Sure is. What a surprise, huh?
Oh, yeah. Shocker. So at the moment, we've only got a few, but one of the first is Wyoming has actually passed a law, unfortunately, SF0009. It's one of those, quote, parental rights bills. It demands that no school system can keep info about kids from their parents, which, as you probably have already guessed, it's things like if your kid comes out as gay to a counselor, you have to tell the parent, like that sort of situation. And it also can't issue any kind of well-being questionnaire or health screening tool without parental consent. And that one we learned about from the ACLU's anti-LGBTQ bill tracker.
Yeah, which is awesome. So helpful.
Oh, extremely. Because, again, like we've said before, keeping up with this stuff is rough. And this one in particular is pretty standard, I hate to say. But a lot of bills are centering around things like making sure that kids are outed to their parents as quickly as possible and that they don't get the help or support they need if they feel like they need to be private about that until they know that their household is a safe one to be out in.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're going to see that we're going to talk about that later. You see a lot of the same language and structure in all of these bills that are just sort of cookie cutter across different states. You know, and it's really frustrating. I mean, I don't know about you. I'm sure this is the case for you too. We both, you know, grew up going to small schools in the South. When I was in school, there were one or two teachers who were like the safe teachers to go to, right? That every queer kid in school was going to see and talk to about their problems and even just be around. Even if they didn't come out publicly, you could be around this person and know that they were safe. And with these kinds of bills, now that person is legally obligated to tell your parents if you want to go by different pronouns or a different name or talk to them about, really anything relating to gender or sex. And it's really just miserable, and as if these teachers weren't under enough fire from just sort of perpetually being at risk of Chayaraichik trying to destroy your life through libs of TikTok.
Oh, yeah.
So I really feel for them.
It also covers things like sex education, especially like if they're going to run a sex ed course, you have to inform the parents, which is not something I figured was out of the norm. they sure sent forms home with me like 20 years ago. So.
Oh yeah, and in a lot of school districts in the South, you pretty regularly hear about sex education programs being canceled because the students' parents threw a little hissy fit about them.
God forbid that they tell you that sex is evil and will give you all the STDs, which was about the length of my sex education in middle school.
Oh yeah, ours was completely useless, and it's ridiculous because it's one of those things where kids need to know what's appropriate and inappropriate contact with adults and older kids. That's how they know when they're in a bad situation. They need to know what consent is and that they can say no and how to say no. And whenever you close off these avenues to kids for them to learn about these things, they're so much more at risk for being sexually abused by the people in their lives. It's just disgusting. But moving on to slightly better news, on March the 8th, the Florida legislature adjourned, and at the time, because they were just waiting on the floor, 21 out of 22 proposed anti-LGBTQ bills died. And that's great news. That's such fantastic news.
Even Florida can't get it done right now, thankfully.
I know, yeah. They couldn't reach a conclusion on a lot of these bills, and as a result, they are gone. They might be reintroduced later under similar or even the same wording, but for now, they're gone. Two really good bills, really good for them to have died, were House Bill 599, which would have expanded the don't say gay policies that Ron DeSantis dreamed up evilly to the workplace. Right now they mostly affect schools. They would make it so that you essentially can't discuss being gay or trans or anything like that in your workplace. It would really, really be difficult if your workplace is like about being gay. Like, what if you run like a queer newspaper or something, right?
Good luck.
What if we were in Florida? Heaven forbid.
Oh, God.
We can't do our podcast because it's illegal for us to talk.
It's part of our work. Oh, no. Don't you report me, you narc.
Also good to have died was House Bill 1639, which would have mandated that trans people have their sex assigned at birth listed on their driver's license, as well as penalizing health insurance plans that cover gender-affirming care and requiring insurers to cover conversion therapy, which a lot of the time these people will sort of obfuscate. They'll call it gender exploratory therapy. Don't let them lie to you. It's conversion therapy, 100%.
There are a few other, I don't know if I can say examples really, but like with trans kids, they have a lot of exceptions, quote unquote, to their therapy if it's religious based. And you can probably imagine being in primarily Christian areas what that religious based counseling for having gender identity crises might look like.
The most evil.
Yeah, it's about as evil as it can get, yeah. Thankfully, West Virginia is also doing, I wouldn't say great, but they have followed in Florida's footsteps. At midnight on March 9th, West Virginia's legislature adjourned, and as a result, 20 anti-LGBTQ bills died on the floor.
Rest in peace. Don't come back.
Please, never do. That included House Bill 5243, which was a women's rights bill that would have ended state recognition of trans people and, of course, would have removed any and all legal protections that trans people have in that state, which is about as bad as it gets as far as one of these kind of bills go.
Yeah, essentially being denied personhood under the law.
Personhood, healthcare, fancy new car that apparently people are just giving to us. All the giant perks of being trans.
I got my Soros car. Where's yours?
It's parked in the driveway, but can't get a license. No money. It also killed House Bill 5297, which would have abolished gender-affirming care for trans youth, and that's just kind of a 1-2 punch of bills there. If one fails, they like to get in a secondary one just to make sure that kids suffer a little more.
Just to ensure maximum suffering of the children.
And there's already a ban on gender-affirming care in West Virginia anyway, but it carved out an exception for children experiencing quote-unquote severe dysphoria, and which, as a child with precocious puberty might need. There are situations where even the worst monsters realize they might need to give puberty blockers to children, but...
I don't imagine they had a particularly salient definition of severe dysphoria. Which is sort of a good thing, because that kind of leaves room for a physician to be like, oh yeah, kid's got severe dysphoria. Give them puberty blockers, you know? A decent clinician who actually wants to help their kid. And that information for both West Virginia and Florida, we got from Erin Reed and her newsletter, Erin in the Morn. So that was really helpful, and we appreciate the work that she does so much. It's really hard to keep track of all this stuff. We really rely on the reporting that especially other trans journalists do.
Oh, absolutely.
So with that behind us, terribly, we must now move on to the main segment of this episode, where, as we explained last week, we're going to talk about the extremely tragic death of 16-year-old Nex Benedict. A lot of initial reporting on Nex used they-them pronouns because that's what Nex's grandmother/adoptive mother, Sue Benedict, said that they used at home. Now, since then, we found out, because of reporting by NBC Out's Joe Yerkeba, that Nex, at least among his friends, preferred he/him pronouns and openly identified as transgender, right? You know, some people are non-binary and they don't, for various reasons, don't personally consider themselves to be trans or part of the trans umbrella, if you will. A lot of non-binary people do. So Nex may still have been non-binary, but very much considered himself transgender and preferred he/him pronouns. So just for consistency's sake, even though he, I think, preferred or was fine with both, we're going to go with what he preferred among his friends and just call him he/him throughout the piece. So just to set the stage before we launch into what happened to Nex, I want to talk about kind of the atmosphere in Oklahoma as it stands and, you know, at the time that Nex died. So Oklahoma has passed multiple bills curtailing the rights of LGBTQ Oklahomans in recent years. In 2023 alone, Senate Bills 26, 404, and 613 were passed. Right off the top, starting with Senate Bill 26, it forced public and charter schools in Oklahoma, grades K through 12, to segregate students in bathrooms and dressing rooms by their anatomical sex, with no regard for their gender identity.
Senator Julie Daniels, who was the principal senatorial author of the bill, said, quote, SB 404 clarifies that when the government makes a benefit available to private entities, it cannot exclude religious entities from accessing the benefit primarily based on their character as a religious entity.
Yeah, so State Bill 404 was kind of about, basically, if you're a transphobic religious entity, nobody can hold that against you, right? On like a legal level or state level for like benefits and stuff like that.
A great thing to be codified into law, yeah.
Certainly.
And then on top of that, Senate Bill 613 made illegal puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, and gender-affirming surgery for anyone under 18, which we discussed briefly before. There were smaller exceptions for intersex kids, any cisgender kids experiencing precocious puberty, and anybody injured, diseased, or infected by gender-affirming care. Their quote, not mine. Infected is my favorite part of that sentence for...
I've been infected by gender.
I think you'll find me extremely woman now.
You'll find I'm quite infectious. And this is actually something that we saw with the recent NHS ban on puberty blockers. These laws don't affect cis kids, right? If you're a cisgender child experiencing precocious puberty, no problem. You can get those blockers. You know, we don't want your life to be made unduly difficult by a puberty that causes you discomfort. Unless you're trans, idiot. You know, and this is just another example in a very long line of they want to view us as other. They want us to be subhuman. It's miserable. It's so disgusting that you would genuinely believe it's okay to separate cis children from trans children and receiving puberty blockers, especially when their argument is so frequently that we don't know what they do long term. Do they do damage? Do they hurt children? But that's not what they really want to know. It's fear mongering. They want trans kids to not be able to access these medicines, but it's fine if it's cis kids. Hate it so much.
Cruelty is always the end game with bills like this, and it's so blatant.
Absolutely. To quote Adam Serwer, the cruelty is the point, right?
Yep.
So in August of 2023, Oklahoma Governor Kevin Stitt signed into law an executive order that proponents called, again, a Women's Bill of Rights. Just like Utah's House Bill 257, the executive order legally defines gender bisex. It uses word for word, verbatim, the same language. And the reason these two pieces of legislature look identical in Oklahoma and Utah and Kansas, Tennessee, North Dakota, and Montana is because they're all copied directly from a group called the Independent Women's Voice, which is a policy branch of the anti-trans activist and explicitly anti-feminist organization Independent Women's Forum. They believe that Title IX protections for gender should be rolled back entirely because the Obama administration deigned to state that they cover trans students as well. Isn't that lovely?
That's strange. And hold on a second there. Are you telling me that all of these stories about independent, concerned parents coming together in their states, independent of any larger governing bodies, aren't actually coming together and making these bills? Are you telling me there's some sort of nefarious groups in the backgrounds trying to pass bills around?
I don't want to say anything that's true and correct like that. However, yeah, it seems like these grassroots organizations might not be so grassroots, which we already know.
Shocker.
We've known for a few years now. We had the Eliza Ray Shoup leaks, where she had been involved with some anti-trans groups behind the scenes who were advising people like Fred Deutsch, the junior senator, I think, from North Dakota, maybe. Something like that's a shot in the dark. I think that might be right. Could be wrong. If it's wrong, shut up. I don't care. He sucks. The point is, these people are working behind the scenes in groups with email chains and such, talking about, here's how you should phrase this, Senator. Cackling and rubbing the tips of their fingers together evilly. So, and also important, you may have heard of this, in January of this year, Oklahoma State Superintendent of Public Education Ryan Walters appointed Chaya Raichik, who is a stochastic terrorist and the owner/operator of anti-transgender activist social media presence Libs of TikTok, to an Oklahoma Library Media Advisory Committee. So this is a woman who has publicly expressed repeatedly a desire for books to be banned because they feature LGBTQ characters and stories in any capacity, who is now in charge of, to a degree, all of the public libraries in schools across Oklahoma, thanks to Ryan Walters, who, it must be said, is a crazy man. I mean, this is not the first horrible thing he's done. He's a big old Bible thumper, and boy, that is exactly how he executes his office.
I think most people would probably be familiar with her through an extremely embarrassing interview she gave. Was that earlier this month, or was it end of last month?
That's a great question. I want to say it was last month. The interview with Taylor Lawrence.
Yeah, where she just completely unhinged. The least ready to be in public person I've seen give an interview in quite some time.
That was such a strange interview. It just in public, on a sidewalk, wearing a shirt with Taylor Lawrence's face on it. Just, and a big, like a denim skirt all the way down to her ankles. Like, these from people. I don't know. I can't gripe too much. I'm gonna get in trouble with the Hasidic Jews.
And the people who love wearing all denim all the time.
Oh, you mean the Pentecostals?
Yeah, I was going to say Canadians, but I guess that too.
Yeah, she's awful. That interview is really weird and just terrible to watch. And probably shouldn't have happened to begin with. Do we need to hear from this woman more? We didn't learn too many interesting things. She did say she used to be a teacher. I thought that was interesting.
Woe be to those poor kids.
I know. Prior to that, the only thing we knew about her work before Libs of TikTok was that she was like a real estate person in Brooklyn, which not super informative. I'm fascinated. I'd like to know more about, if she was employed as an actual proper teacher somewhere, like if that's what she went to school to do. But still, it's probably just not worth talking to her,
No, there's really nothing to be gleaned from there beyond what we already know.
Well, do you want to, moving along to what happened to Nex Benedict, do you want to give us a rundown of exactly what happened on the day that Nex was involved in a fight, and then the next day, tragically, when he died?
Sure. And we'll be going through most of this chronologically because there are a lot of little things that pop up in order that make the story a little weirder with how certain things were phrased from authorities and such, but on February 7th, Nex Benedict was jumped by 3 girls in a public bathroom at Owassa High School after pouring water on them for what he described as harassment over the way he and his friends dressed. According to Nex, though, interestingly, he had no contact with these girls before that. He didn't even know who they were, didn't know their names. He said he fought back, but he was tackled to the floor and beaten, at which point he blacked out. After the fight, he was taken to the hospital by his adoptive mother/grandmother, Sue Benedict, where he was interviewed by a school resource officer about the incident. He gave a statement. He was then discharged from the hospital and fell asleep that night, quote, with a sore head, listening to music, according to his grandmother. The next afternoon, as he and his mother were preparing for an appointment in Tulsa, Nex collapsed in the living room. Miss Benedict called an ambulance, and when paramedics arrived, they found Nex wasn't breathing. He was then taken to the St. Francis Pediatric Emergency Room, and he was later declared dead. He was 16 years old.
So young. I mean, that's so young.
Completely preventable. Astoundingly
100%.
Unwarranted response to having water poured on you for obvious reasons.
Yeah, I think he mentioned something about, and we'll talk about this more a little bit later, but there's footage of the school resource officer who interviewed Nex in the hospital. Some of their chatter is a little unclear, but it sounds like there was another incident with these girls, but I think they had just been caught vaping together or something like that. But he was very clear that he did not know them in any real capacity. They weren't even like his enemies, right? You know, I think anybody who's gone through a public high school in America has had at least one arch enemy during that experience. Just somebody you hate and who hates you, and you're always butting heads and getting in trouble together. That wasn't the case here. These girls really did not know him at all, from the sounds of it.
No, and it does put to light how any kind of fight can end horrifically. It's not most fantasy depictions of a fist fight really, really do not sell how dangerous it is to be attacked by someone, especially if you should hit your head on anything.
It is so easy to concuss yourself, to get a TBI, to do serious, potentially lethal damage in a fight. You know, I mean, you can hit somebody and they can fall and crack their head open on a concrete sidewalk and die. It's so easy. I have a friend who once concussed herself standing up too fast beneath a top loader laundry machine.
Wow.
The door was open and she just smashed her head right into it. The human body is a weird thing where it's like incredibly fragile and also incredibly durable. At the end of the day, you know, you're just not going to win a fight against 3 people. Nex could have been twice as big and just jacked to shit and would have lost that fight most likely. That's just the reality of it. And
absolutely.
And it's just so common for even a little brawl to become a fatal incident. So most of the initial reporting about this incident was done by local outlets, and it was most of the information they had at the time was just police reports, which were pretty light on details, and a lot of those articles also used the wrong name and pronouns for Nex. You know, I don't necessarily blame them for getting things wrong right off the bat. It's pretty difficult in those early hours after some kind of news breaks. I will say, if you're a journalist, it is your prerogative not to just trust what the police say about a situation. If you're a human being, don't trust the police. Don't talk to the police. Don't commend the police. So the earliest substantial reporting on Nex's death and the fact that he was transgender was done by Sue Kerr, writing for her blog, the Pittsburgh Lesbian Correspondence. She wrote that Nex's funeral services were on the 15th of February, and she criticized Owassa High School staff for failing to ensure adequate medical care for Nex. That's a thing we're going to talk about more later. She lamented that the death of a transgender child had not yet become a blip on anybody's radar. You know, on the 15th, when she wrote this, kind of nobody else was talking about this. This was not on anybody's radar at all until the 20th of February.
It took 5 whole extra days. And at that point, the story broke nationally. It was broken by Bevan Hurley at The Independent. Miss Benedict described Nex as, quote, a straight-A student who enjoyed drawing, reading, playing video games Ark and Minecraft, and was devoted to his cat Zeus. She said that Nex was, quote, severely bullied at school for over a year, because of his gender identity, of course. She said that it was the school who failed to call an ambulance or the police after the incident, and that she was furious about it. The school also issued Nex a 2-week suspension as a result of the fight. Whenever you're bullied in high school, you get hit with the zero tolerance, and it's your fault that you're not what everyone else wants you to be.
They started that when we were young. I want to say that was like a Bush administration thing.
Yeah, that was when I was... God, was I even in middle school yet?
I'm not sure. We were very young, but yeah, that was a thing that came out when we were kids. We're old, by the way. Anybody who's listening to this, I don't know if you're aware, we're fucking ancient.
Practically falling apart at the seams.
I'm going to turn to dust at any moment. Yeah, they started these programs they called zero tolerance. So if you get into a fight or any significant kind of trouble, boom, you're gone. They suspend you for a long time, or they'll even outright expel you from school, which is interesting considering like those same schools that I went to still like paddled kids when they were hit. If you're not sure what that means, it's when your principal hits you with a big stick on your butt and you're a child because you did something wrong. Isn't that weird? Isn't that strange?
I don't think my school did corporal punishment. There may have been an opt-ins. I really don't think this is right. For some reason, I've got it stuck in my head that there was like an opt-in that you could do, and that might have been before I got to high school.
If they
like your parents could be like,
you.
yeah, if my child sucks, spank them. And you're just like, excuse me?
Please beat my child. Please physically abuse my small child if they step out of line.
I'm trusting you to do the wrong thing here.
The thing a lot of people don't talk about, children are kind of a second-class minority citizen group who are constantly oppressed by like every adult around them.
Oh, yeah. Once you hit 18, you'll figure out what being a human is all about. But before then, you're sort of like a Tamagotchi.
Now we're going to talk about the Owasso PD's response to all of this. Starting out, after Nex's death, the Owasso Police Department put out a statement saying that they were, and I quote, conducting a very active and thorough investigation of the time and events that led up to the death of the student. We're going to find out later that's bullshit, or at least it sounds like bullshit.
Yeah.
An Owasso PD spokesman, Lieutenant Nick Boatman, said that they were awaiting the results of an autopsy and toxicology screen from the medical examiner's office, and that, quote, all charges would be on the table once the results came back. Now, Lieutenant Boatman likes to speak out of turn, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But it's also worth noting that around this time frame, the OPT also uploaded a bunch of videos related to Nex to their YouTube account, which is kind of weird. It included school CCTV footage of, it's a high angle, awkward angle of what I think is like maybe a lunchroom where the bathroom is that the fight happened. And so you can see the kids go into this bathroom, and then shortly after, a school staff member kind of hurries into the bathroom, I assume, to break up the fight. Now, I saw a lot of people reporting that a school official took a really long time to get to the bathroom. I want to say that's really not true, unless the footage is cut up in some way, which is kind of possible. It's a fixed angle, it doesn't move at all. It would be pretty easy to cut it. But at least from what we see in the footage, it's like 17 seconds from when Nex goes into the bathroom to when somebody, an adult, is hurrying over to the bathroom to stop whatever's happening. I don't want to give them any props or anything, but like, I think there was kind of this narrative about like, did whatever adult was nearby want this to happen and allow it to happen? That doesn't seem to be the case. I don't know for sure, but that's just kind of what I noticed. It also included footage of Nex being walked to the principal's office by somebody after the fight, where I assume was where he was given his 2-week suspension. And then, like I mentioned earlier, body cam footage of the school resource officer interviewing Nex in the hospital. I don't know if they have these in other countries, in the UK, wherever. School resource officer is like a local police department officer who's assigned to your school to essentially act as like security. They don't really do that. There's a lot of complication in like handling students as an adult. So a lot of the time it comes down to teachers who will just kind of like insert themselves between students during a fight and tell them to knock it off. Sometimes people will be restrained, but the SRO mostly just kind of, I guess in theory, is there to deal with something like an active shooter situation. Boy, that sure doesn't help.
Which they don't. They sure do not.
Just like any other cop, completely fucking useless at all times. The Oklahoman also identified that SRO as Officer Caleb Thomas. Now, in the video, where Thomas is talking to Nex and his grandmother in the hospital. He actually admits that the school dropped the ball they didn't notify him. They didn't call an ambulance right away or at all. And he just openly admits that they dropped the ball there. So that's pretty funny. He's right. Absolutely. They dropped the ball. He also said that, and I kind of get this, but it's crazy. He said that if they were to take the issue to court, Nex might be also found at fault because he threw water on those girls. In the state of Oklahoma, that does constitute assault and battery. I would argue it does not constitute being beaten viciously. I would say those girls are certainly more at fault than Nex was.
I cannot imagine a jury would be sympathetic to hearing, oh, someone threw water on you, so you got together with your friends, you calculated an assault, and you followed somebody into the bathroom.
Violently beat him.
I cannot imagine that would hold up in any kind of court situation unless you got a real bad jury.
I'd like to think so, and we may find out. Nex is gone, but that doesn't mean that this can't progress to a litigatory situation in the future. And I hope it does against the school, the students and their families. Hopefully. We're talking about a dead 16-year-old. This is absolutely something that should go to courts. Not that I have a tremendous amount of faith in them resolving it, judicially. One other thing that OPD released, it wasn't on their YouTube channel, but a few local news outlets in the area circulated. It was a portion of the 911 call that Miss Benedict made when Nex collapsed. We're not going to play that or anything. It involves a lot of misgendering of Nex, and there's not a tremendous amount of information in there. Mostly just that Nex collapsed, was breathing strange, erratically. It sounds, to me, not a doctor, like a seizure.
So, independent reporter Marisa Cabas pressed the chief of Owasso PD, Dan Yancey, about the death. At first, all she got was a no-info statement. Sorry, we have nothing to share with you. Well, he probably didn't use the word sorry. She also asked him about text Nex had sent to a family member after returning home from the emergency room. He gave his side of the story, explained the water throwing incident, how he was interviewed by the resource officer, so on. After a little more hounding, Yancey said that much of the public information being shared about the case was false, though he didn't elaborate on what exactly he thought was false. He just knew that something was wrong in the public eye.
I'd love to know what, Yancey.
I would love to. He said they were waiting on results from the medical examiner's report, and they were taking the case seriously because Nex's sister is married to an Owasso officer.
Now that's an important thing to note, yeah.
In this one case, they weren't just being lazy about it.
We only care about you if you're related to a cop in some tangential way. Otherwise,
I cannot imagine admitting that.
I know. What a ridiculous thing to say. It's like the blue line filter hadn't been turned off when he contacted her.
Later in that day, he reiterated the no-info boilerplate response, but he did add a new point that the preliminary results of the autopsy suggested Nex had not died, quote, as a result of trauma. When Cabas pressed Yancey on the info, he said, quote, "We suspect what happened, but unfortunately I can't release what happened until the tox and other test results come back. Sorry." And then after that, he just completely ghosted her and hasn't responded since, as far as I'm aware.
Now, it sounds like from your dundering tone of voice that Yancey may not be the best texter.
No, it sounds like he had a little difficulty and was auto-correcting happened to happen.
I can't release what happened.
I am not some kind of time wizard. I do not know what will happen.
I ain't no time wizard, y'all. Good Lord.
After that, the OPD posted a statement on Facebook, and it seemed to be defensive of the employees of the high school's actions, as well as suggesting Nex's death was unrelated. Sue Benedict, of course, spoke to the founder and editor of independent newsletter Popular Information, Judd Legum. OPD failed to contact Ms. Benedict before releasing the statement, which she described as, quote, a big cover, something to calm the people.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly a strange move.
I guess it's not terribly surprising, as we'll, again, find out later. There's, at this point, some national press coverage. There's pressure being applied from different places, which forces Lieutenant Nick Boatman to step in and say some super out-of-pocket shit that's not true.
Just so strange that Mrs. Benedict wasn't notified in any way. Hey, by the way, we're just going to start telling people stuff, so buckle up.
Boatman said that the reason he didn't do that, he didn't contact Sue Benedict before releasing this statement about her grandson, was because he just assumed that the ME's office would have already contacted her. And you know what they say about assuming.
Oh, you sure do. And Mrs. Benedict attorney released a statement stating that the facts of the case were troubling at best, and that the family would be conducting its own investigation, including independently interviewing witnesses and collecting all available evidence. So far, we have no word on whether or not they've ordered independent autopsy results or toxicology screening or anything. We're still waiting on the main toxicology report, or at least more details from it. Leggett pointed out that parts of the OPD statement are copied directly from an OHS statement about the incident. So they clearly shared a little bit of information back and forth about how they would like to release this, or at the very least were just grabbing what was publicly available to put out to the public a second time.
Yeah, and when Judd Legum spoke to him, he just fully acknowledged that they came across as kind of like a mouthpiece for the school. And he also agreed that it's really abnormal for the police to release information about a case like this piecemeal. He said they were trying to, and I quote, head off some of this national scrutiny. And a part of the reason that apparently the two statements sounded so familiar, he said they wanted to confirm that they had investigated the statement by Owasso High School and confirmed what they said to be true. Probably better ways to do that than just copy-paste parts of their statement into your statement. But far be it from me to tell you how to do your job, Lieutenant Nick Boatman. And he also admitted to Judd Legum that the medical examiners never told him that Nex hadn't died as a result of the fight. He said that he interpreted the autopsy that way, what he had seen of the results. And at that time as well, Judd Legum acquired an affidavit for search warrant filed by Detective Penny Hamrick, which stated that the OPD suspected foul play and was investigating Nex's death as a murder at that time. I don't know if that's still the case. Certainly, I don't have any access to internal police records because I'm not a cop, thank God. But yeah, I mean, that's incredible. And I haven't heard a lot of people report on that either, that at least at one point that the OPD was investigating this as a murder. That's huge.
And then to say that just go off the handle and interpret the autopsy in a way that...
The way that benefits the OPD best,
but
right?
It does benefit the OPD, yeah. Yeah. What a choice.
The way that makes it look like we're least guilty.
And of course, after all that information coming to light, public has to react. Whenever you report on a death like this, there's usually not much talk about how the affected actually touched lives around them, and I feel that's a little unfair.
Absolutely.
Quite a few statements here from people who knew Nex personally. Thought it'd be nice to read and remember them as more than just a senseless tragedy. Joe Ukurba reported from a candlelight vigil held for Nex on Sunday, which was the 25th. One of Nex's close friends, Allie, who goes by they, them, said of Nex, quote, "It was one of those things where you meet them and you automatically feel like you've known them for years. They were such an adventurous little thing. It was never really a dull moment with them. They were always someone who was never afraid to be who they are. It was like wherever they went, you were going to accept them, and if you didn't, that was your problem, and they were going to make it your problem." What a wonderful attitude.
Hell yeah.
Allie said Nex and their friend group usually got in trouble for laughing too loudly in class, something that I certainly can't relate to. And that Nex was a really talented artist, something that I actually can't relate to. And his friends often called him Roach or Roachy, which I would love to know how that came about. Hey, Roachy. What's up, Roachy?
Yeah,
something had to have happened, right?
He certainly must have still identified as non-binary if he was going by the name Roachy, right?
Oh, yeah.
What a non-binary name, Roachy.
Extremely.
Roachy. What? Yeah, I do. I would love to know the story behind that name. Either extremely weird or extremely boring. Or maybe one of those ones that nobody remembers. I don't know about you. There are friends who I call by names that are absolutely not their name. And if you ask me why we call them that, it's like, I don't know. 15 years ago, something happened and we all started calling you Thimble. And like now that's where we're at.
That actually happened to me in high school.
They called you Thimble?
Well, not Thimble specifically, which would have been much better than the name I got. It was a 3-letter masculine name that was used as a placeholder because I think there was some sort of running joke where a friend of mine would like ask what was going on and who I was, and I kept saying, I have no idea. So eventually he was like, all right, then we're going to call you X. And then that stuck for the rest of high school with that specific friends group. Just off the cuff, ridiculous nothingness that, frankly, I barely remembered until this point.
Those are kind of the best stories you get about your longest friends. You know, I think we probably have a few of those, having known each other entirely too long, since we were essentially children. Just those things where it's like, I couldn't tell you what it means, but it comes up every now and then, and it absolutely makes us laugh our asses off.
Tyler Wren, a former OHS teacher ousted after harassment from libs of TikTok, described Nex as a fiery kid and said he would light up a room and jump to defend any of his friends if they were getting picked on, given the earlier statement about making his gender presentation their problem.
It's a tough guy. You can see it in that video too. If you go watch the body cam footage, he really does. He has like that T-boy swag where he's just trying to keep it all cool and on the level. He's like, yeah, man, I got jumped. You know how it is. You know how it is, bro. It's really, he seemed very cool. Also, I want to point out Tyler Wren, if you don't know about him, I think it was actually last year, was an employee at OHS who got put on blast by libs of TikTok, essentially for saying that he was a safe space, that if you're queer as a student, you're free to come to me and you'll be safe. And of course, after that, it became a national news cycle that Tyler Wren must be destroyed. And I believe he resigned his position at OHS, which is such a tragedy. There are so few teachers like that at these kinds of schools and these kinds of places. And these kids need them so badly.
Nex's on and off partner, Robin Gray, confirmed that Nex preferred he/him pronouns and was transgender, and said he was so much more than his transness, which, of course, is what we're trying to help reinforce here.
Yes, absolutely.
Robin said his favorite memory of Nex was the first time Nex cooked for him, which is personally one of my favorite couples bonding activities. I have a lot of fond memories of doing that.
Yes, cooking with or for a partner. I'm not the best cook in the world, but I tell you, I love making food and then other people eat it and they're like, this is so good. It's such a soul healing experience.
Nex's most recent partner, Spencer, said Nex helped him come out as gay to his parents. Of Nex, he said he made everything easier. He always kept energy levels high. He would always keep the room in a good mood. He was always one of the brightest kids in the room, whether he would smile or not.
Imagine that, being the bodyguard for your friend coming out to his parents. I'm telling you,
so nerve-wracking. I cannot imagine.
He was a tough kid, man. 16 years old and probably ballsier than I am.
Oh, certainly was more ballsy than I was at that age, for sure. I didn't come out until much later.
I was a huge coward when I was 16. I was always scared of everything. And just to kind of tack on here too, if we quote anybody who was a friend of Nex or who knew Nex or spoke on Nex's behalf, and we get, any preferred names or pronouns wrong, apologies for that. We pull most of these from just reporting that other people like Joe Yerkeba have done. So I'm kind of just assuming that Joe did her due diligence, seems like a good reporter. So hopefully everything is correct there. But the following day after the vigil, on Monday, February the 26th, fantastically, more than 40 OHS students staged a walkout to protest both about Nex's death and an issue of bullying at their school, a larger issue of bullying. Now, OHS officials said that they were aware of the planned walkout before it happened, and that they, quote, supported students' right to demonstrate, but that any student who walked out would be marked absent unless they had a note from their parent or guardian, which is just a bit of a dick move, I think.
You huge cowards.
Suspend a child who's dead, and then...
How dare you be politically active?
Just ridiculous. Though I will say, my school certainly wouldn't have publicly said they supported my right to demonstrate. They wouldn't have even...
No.
They wouldn't have even put on the farce, right?
They would have brought out the fire truck and started spraying us with hoses.
In fact, I think this is a distant memory now. It's been 12, 13 years since I graduated high school, and I want to say this was in my freshman or sophomore year, there was some kind of walkout. I don't even remember what it was about, so that tells you just how important it was.
Yeah.
And a lot of us got in trouble for it. It's just very explicitly said, like, no, we don't support your right to demonstrate. Get back to class. Okay, thanks. So OHS spokesperson Brock Crawford told NBC Out that OWASA students have an annual assembly about who they should report bullying to. He said they take bullying very seriously. Yeah.
I bet.
I don't know about that. Chief Kane, who attended OHS for his 10th and 11th grade school years, but had moved to online classes for his senior year because of harassment and bullying, said that OWASA students would frequently call him and his partner the F-slur and use the N-word openly and without repercussions. Sounds a lot like where I went to school, too.
Sure does.
I think I've read that OHS has 3,000 students. They're kind of a little bit rural outside of Tulsa. So it sounds pretty familiar to my experience growing up. Just a tremendous amount of bigotry among the student body. You know, they learn it from their parents. Nobody corrects them. Nobody tells them it's wrong. We also heard from Allie again saying that about bullying, said that even if something did happen, that there would be no point in going to any kind of administration or the teachers about it because absolutely nothing would be done. They said that they had seen it time and time again with their friends.
We've talked a couple times about how children are often treated as a second-class citizen, and it is appalling to me how many schools take the sort of it gets better campaign approach to bullying, where they just kind of throw up their hands. Zero tolerance policies are in effect, so everyone involved in any kind of bullying incident is suspended so they can wash their hands of it. And the message feels like, basically, as long as you're in school, you're just going to suffer. But eventually you'll turn 18 and it'll all be behind you and it'll just be a funny memory. And that drives me insane, because it leads to situations like this, where someone is harassed for an extended period of time, they've complained about it, and then as a result, he's dead.
Yeah. It's not going to get better for Nex ever, because he's dead. And, you know, we can't say this was a murder. We can't say that because we don't have the necessary proof to say that at this point. But what we do know is that regardless of exactly what the exact specific thing that killed Nex Benedict, we know that what really killed him was bullying.
So after the Human Rights Campaign called on the Department of Education to investigate OHS, the Department of Education stated that they were opening an investigation into whether or not the school had responded appropriately to Nex's harassment. And as we saw earlier with the statement made by the school resource officer, he certainly didn't believe it was handled in the correct way. So we'll see how that turns out.
Immediately said that they dropped the ball.
Specifically, though, they were asked to determine whether or not the school had violated Title IX sex-based anti-discrimination laws, and they said they were going to do exactly that. Brock Crawford said, quote, "The district is committed to cooperating with federal officials and believes the complaint submitted by HRC is not supported by the facts and is without merit."
Yeah, I bet you do.
Yeah, I imagine you would probably say that.
Yeah, what are you going to... Yeah, no, we really fucked this one up.
Oh, sorry, guys, we fucked the bed on this one.
You think about suing us? You should sue us. Yeah, of course they're going to say that.
We've got so much taxpayer money to give you.
Yeah, they investigated themselves and found no wrongdoing, right?
Oh, yeah.
So we'll see how that goes. I don't know. I don't have a ton of faith in my federal government, much less the Department of Education. Yeah, I don't know. I couldn't tell you. But suffice it to say, I don't expect much to come of that. Even if they do find the school guilty of something, it's just probably not going to turn into any kind of real change enforced by the DOE. You know, if this kind of situation is going to change, it has to be done by the people living in Owasso and working at and attending Owasso high schools. And hopefully that happens, but I don't think the DOE is going to do it.
Something I forgot to mention when we were talking about the protest and the walkout. I know you found at least one, and I've seen at least one. There were several TikToks of former students of the high school talking about how bad they had been bullied when they went there, some of the situations they faced.
I wrote about that for Assigned Media at some point, essentially saying that, you know, don't listen to this and that. Listen to these kids who are going to or recently went to Owasso High School. I can't, off the top of my head, I can't remember this person's name, and maybe I shouldn't put them on blast anyway, because I don't know if they're still public or what, but somebody who went to the school before talked about how, yeah, this is a recurring problem and the school administration does not care that they are told about these situations and they completely fail to act on them. So next up, we're going to talk about the medical examiner's report, which did come out on March the 13th. And I have a lot of thoughts about this. I've tweeted angrily about it already, but the medical examiner's report into Nex's death was released on March 13th, and they allege that Nex's death was a suicide as a result of the combined toxicity of two drugs, Benadryl and Prozac. And I'm going to talk about this a little bit more in a second here, but this is not the easiest thing to do, and based on what we've heard, sounds very unlikely. But Owasso PD released a statement that said, in part, quote, "From the beginning of this investigation, Owasso police observed many indications that this death was the result of suicide." We know that's not true. We know they're lying because of Judd Legum's reporting. They were initially investigating this as a murder. We know they're not telling the truth. This is a narrative they're trying to set up. And, I'll just say it. I think that somebody's straight up lying. I think that the tox screen is not being reported accurately or something like that. Possibly even the medical examiner is lying. I don't know. But I think that, and far be it from me to encourage a conspiracy theory, but in the case of police and state organizations, yeah, don't trust them. Don't trust what they tell you. In these kinds of situations, it's very, very expedient to try and bury this as aggressively as possible, to pretend that, Owasso High School, Owasso PD had nothing, bear no culpability in the death of Nex Benedict. I'm telling you that they do. Absolutely. And I don't believe that Nex killed himself. It just doesn't make sense. We're talking about a kid who was certainly troubled, certainly feeling exhausted by the difficulty he was facing, like any trans kid in America in 2024, but who was still vital, who was still happy to be with his friends and family, who had plans that day, who was preparing to leave the house to go to Tulsa to some appointment with Sue. You're telling me that this kid overdosed on over-the-counter medications intentionally? I think at the absolute worst, this was an accidental death. More likely, I don't think that it was either of those, an accidental death or a suicide.
The timing just doesn't make sense in my mind. If you were that distraught, as someone who's struggled with mental health in the past, I'm pontificating in my own state here, how I would look at it at the time.
Same, yeah.
Why not that evening? Why would you go to bed, rest, wake up the next morning, get ready for an appointment, and then overdose on medication? It just doesn't, the timeline doesn't make sense in my head.
And these medications, they take potentially over an hour to have these kinds of effects when you intentionally overdose on them. So, he would have had to do this pretty recently before his death, and it just doesn't make sense. There's no note. He wasn't ideating to anybody, and I meant to read it out earlier, and I'll just kind of go back to it briefly. That text that we got that he sent to some family member, I don't think it was specified who, but he texted somebody in his family and said, "I got jumped at school 3-on-1, had to go to the ER." They asked, "Are you okay?" And he said, "All good, just scrapes and bruises. Got a shot in the butt for my pain, but if I'm still dizzy and nauseous in the morning, I might have a concussion." He's relaying what doctors told him. And there's just nothing about his behavior or the facts of the matter leading up to his death even kind of sound like suicide. And I know there are exceptions. Of course I do. I've lost friends to suicide. I know that things don't always go exactly the way that statistically they often do. But yeah, there are likelihoods, there are ways that these things typically happen. And anybody who's familiar with the struggles of suicidal ideation or has lost friends to suicide should know, looking at this, that this just does not look right. And frankly, fuck Owasso PD for saying that we always knew. Lying! They're liars! And they're cops, so of course, but still.
Just can't believe they'd fold under the small tide of national pressure.
I'd also like to point out, this is something I found out doing a little research, maybe relevant, maybe not, The Oklahoma Medical Examiner's Office lost its accreditation in 2009. And as far as I can tell, they haven't regained it since. They are not an accredited medical examiner's office.
Hard to say how relevant that is, but it is an interesting tidbit that really doesn't make the whole picture look any better.
Seems strange, yeah. And I pulled up some facts here about Benadryl and about Prozac because I wanted to know. I wanted to know how easy it is to maybe accidentally overdose, or if you want to intentionally overdose, how to do it. So a potentially lethal dose of Benadryl is 20 to 40 milligrams per kilogram of body weight. So if we assume that Nex weighed roughly 59 kilograms or 130 pounds, which I think is a fair guess given we know he was quite the short fella, a short king, if you will, he would have had to consume 1,770 milligrams of Benadryl to risk a fatal overdose. Not to guarantee it, but to risk it. And since Benadryl is most commonly sold in 25 milligram blister tablets, he would have had to take 70 or more tablets. I mean, we're talking like 8 or 9 boxes of Benadryl.
Methodically punching out many, many foil-wrapped pills. It's just not easy or feasible, really.
Sense. Right, and he was on Prozac. It sounded like, I think Sue said something like maybe he didn't always take Prozac, but did for like evening anxiety or something like that. But Prozac is minimally toxic up to doses of 1,500 milligrams, and it has very few interactions with other drugs. Some symptoms of overdosing on Benadryl include unconsciousness and seizures, and symptoms of an overdose on Prozac include vomiting. So it does sound a lot from that 911 call like Nex may have had a seizure, and that may have been what took his life. So, I'm not going to say that accidental death is completely impossible. I am only 100% certain that he did not commit suicide from what we know. And neither of us are doctors, but like, we can look stuff up. Like, information is out there. Come on.
Do a little Googling. Don't just believe the first thing the police tell you, because they'll tell you they were investigating a murder and then suddenly weren't. Yeah,
that is a thing they do apparently. You know, this is a thing that I say all the time. Like, do not trust the police. Do not talk to the police if you can avoid it. And if you're a journalist, you are obligated to question the police, to critically examine anything the police say, because guess what? The police lie. They lie to protect themselves. They lie to protect each other. And organizations that work with the police lie on their behalf because they're all buddies. Don't trust them.
Jacob Bibby, an attorney for the Benedict family, said in a statement the following day that he believed the conclusion of the autopsy should not overshadow the rest of the information in the report, such as the multiple contusions, lacerations, and abrasions found on his head and neck. He also said, quote, rather than allow incomplete accounts to take hold and spread any further, the Benedicts feel compelled to provide a summary of those findings which have not yet been released by the medical examiner's office, particularly those that contradict allegations of the assault on Nex being insignificant. As outlined in the full report, the medical examiner found numerous areas of physical trauma over Nex's body that evidence the severity of the assault. So given what we already know about medication interactions and how he was assaulted, to overlook all of that and just throw up your hands and assume that he took his own life feels insensitive, I would say.
Mm-hmm. Disingenuous. Part of a political narrative, I think.
More and more it feels like everyone involved in this incident just wants it to go away as quickly as possible because it's horrific and it's bringing them bad press. And so they're doing it in the most insensitive ways possible.
And God willing, it's not going to go away.
I sure hope it doesn't.
I hope this stays in the news and that people keep talking about it because Nex deserves so much better. So does every trans person who is extrajudiciously, killed or dies as a result of harassment or bullying in America and across the world. We can't just let this kind of thing fade into obscurity because they all deserve better than that. So on Thursday, March 14th, illustrious President Joe Biden released a statement about Nex's death. And in this statement, he accepts the narrative that Nex's death was a suicide and also offers no concrete help or support for trans Americans beyond the same hollow words he usually shares. Now, I'll admit, I was a bit fooled at the start of this man's presidency because I knew about his personal relationship with, I can't remember her name right now, but trans woman who is, I believe now a senator, who knew his son Hunter. They were very close. He talked a lot about He did a foreword for her autobiography where he talked about how trans people deserve respect and dignity. I never expected a lot out of Joe Biden, but the way he is underdelivered for trans people and really everybody in America is just so frustrating. And I'll read some of this statement. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but he put out a statement.
No reason to. Why? No. Why bother?
He said, Jill and I are heartbroken by the recent loss of Nex Benedict. Every young person deserves to have the fundamental right and freedom to be who they are and feel safe and supported at school and in their communities. Nex Benedict, a kid who just wanted to be accepted, should still be here with us today. Yeah, Joe, he should. They all should
Maybe
be.
You should have done something. Literally anything.
Maybe you could do something about that as the president of the fucking country, my guy.
If only he had literally any powers to do any fucking thing, but his hands are tied.
And don't take this to misconstrue. Clearly, neither of us like Donald Trump. Don't even think it. No. Don't even think
Piece of shit. Worthless human being.
Absolute piece of shit. Certainly worse than Joe Biden. But look, Joe Biden sucks too. So the last little piece here, because this story is still essentially ongoing, right? Like we're still learning about this and investigations are being done. According to Oklahoma's medical examiner's office, we're going to get the full results of the autopsy and the toxicology report in, they said, about 10 business days. And so based on when they said that, should be on or about March 27th. Now, of course, that is after the airing of this episode of the podcast, much less our recording of it. So we're not going to be able to talk about that now, but we will, of course, stay abreast of the situation and we'll keep you updated in our next episode. Hopefully we learn something useful. Hopefully more comes to light.
Frankly, I would be surprised.
I would be too. And I would expect this, if it does stay in the public eye, to continue happening for potentially years. If this goes to court, whether it's against the girls who fought Nex or the school or the PD or whatever, court cases take a long time. We could be looking at years before we get definitive, results in any direction on any of this. But we're going to keep up with it as best we can and try to keep you informed as well. So that concludes what we know about Nex Benedict. It's possible we left some things out. It's a lot to cover. If you know anything we don't, feel free to share it, quote, tweeting the podcast when it's released. Absolutely. We always love to learn about anything we may have missed or overlooked. But I also want to talk about, as much as Nex Benedict's death is important and tragic, Nex is far from the only trans person who has died in the last year or two. I really want to take a second. The Human Rights Campaign has a very helpful page for both last year and this year about fatal violence against transgender and gender nonconforming people. They have some statistics here. I think it's really important to remember. In 2023, and I'm sure we'll see these stats continue into 2024, 84% of the victims of violence in the trans community were people of color. 50% of them were Black transgender women. So we talk about this stuff a lot, and it is tragic, but as two white trans women, we are generally not the victims of this violence. More often than not, it's people of color, and especially Black trans women, who are the victims of this violence. And I think that's important to acknowledge. A lot of these people just do not get talked about when they die from violence. And then when a white trans person dies, it suddenly becomes much larger news. So certainly, I don't want to suggest that Nex Benedict isn't important. We've devoted an entire episode of this podcast to talking about him. But I think we should all be aware of the fact that a lot of Black trans people and non-white trans people die every year in America. And that's really tragic. So the Human Rights Campaign provides a list with the names and little blurbs about all of these people who they know have died. There may be more people that died that we don't know about, but we do know about these people, and I'm going to read their names and the blurb that HRC provided for them. So thank you so much for that information. Starting with, in 2023, Amber Minor, a 40-year-old Black trans woman who was killed in Raytown, Missouri on December 24th, 2023. She was described as a warrior with a strong will and spirit. Amber was also a previous survivor of violence, recovering from gunshot wounds and having been hit by a car. Megan Riley Lewis, a transgender woman and a mother of two who was a staple in her community for transgender activism. She devoted her life to feeding hungry and unhoused queer people. On December 27, 2023, reports shared that Lewis was shot and killed by a food delivery person following a verbal altercation that turned physical in Bel Air, Maryland. Despite attempts to save Lewis by emergency responders, she ultimately passed away after being taken to the hospital. Savannah Ryan Williams, a 38-year-old Cuban and native transgender woman who was described by her partner as a loving, caring person. Amber Moom with the Aliveness Project described Savannah as fierce, full of life. She had a big personality and an even bigger heart during an interview with the Minnesota Public Radio. Savannah was violently killed in Minneapolis, Minnesota on November 29th. On December 7th, 2023, the Minnesota State Capitol echoed in remembrance as Savannah's partner, friends, chosen family, and even legislators and public officials gathered for a vigil in her honor. Jean Butchert, a 26-year-old white transgender man, loved camping, foraging, gardening, and mushroom hunting, according to his obituary, which earned him the nickname Nature Boy. He was the youngest of three siblings. Having earned himself a Bachelor of Science degree, he was working toward becoming a teacher, hoping to teach middle and high schoolers about the environment. Sean was fatally shot in Belleville, Michigan, in a mobile home park during a series of violent incidents on August 4th, 2023. Kijuan Richardson, a 21-year-old gender-expansive black man, loved to sing and is remembered for their deep love of music by friends and family. On November 14th, 2023, Kijuan was shot and killed in Toledo, Ohio, while driving around their hometown with their friend, Amiri Reed, a black transgender woman. And according to friends and family, 21-year-old Amiri Reed, a black trans woman, was the life of the party. She had an infectious sense of humor. She was fatally shot on November 14th in Toledo. Lakendra Andrews, a 26-year-old black transgender woman, was from Shreveport, Louisiana, and was the founder of a nonprofit. According to Pittsburgh Lesbian Correspondence, Lakendra was interested in cooking, drawing, dancing, baking, and music, and she was a fan of Nicki Minaj. Lakendra was fatally shot on April 29, 2023, in Dallas, Texas. Initial reporting misgendered Lakendra. HRC learned of her death from New Trans Movement, Inc. in November. Londa Price, a 26-year-old black transgender woman, was described by her aunt as being always beautiful and pretty, saying she'll give you the shirt off her back, and I think that's kind of what put her in this situation to get her hurt. London was fatally shot in Miami-Dade County on October 23, 2023. Lisa Love, a 35-year-old black transgender woman, was described as a friend, as funny, smart, beautiful, and a breath of fresh air to this world. Lisa's cousin remembered her as an all-around good person who did not deserve this. A loving, caring, free-spirited person, always smiling and laughing. Lisa was fatally shot on October 17, 2023, while walking home from a friend's house. An investigation of the shooting is ongoing. Lisa's family members believe it was a targeted shooting. Dominic Dupree, who is also known as Dominic Palace, was a 25-year-old black gender-expansive person from Gary, Indiana, who operated companies including Private Protection Division LLC and Hondo 4 Lawn Care and Snow Removal LLC. Tragically, Dominic was fatally shot in Chicago on October 13, 2023. Homicide detectives are currently investigating. On social media, several of Dominic's friends and family members expressed their grief and condolences. Amy Johnson, who was also known as Amy Robertson, was a 30-year-old black transgender woman from Washington, D.C. Amy was well-loved by many friends. Tragically, on October 14th, Amy was killed during an assault when she was pushed into a roadway and hit by a car. The driver of the car, who was not involved in the assault, stayed at the scene. Homicide detectives are searching for the person who assaulted her and caused her death. Sherilyn Marjorie was a 35-year-old Latin transgender woman and drag performer who one friend remembered as the best impersonator in Tijuana, my second Edith Marquez. She was beloved by her local LGBTQ community in Albuquerque, New Mexico, where she was killed on September 17, 2023. A suspect, Sherilyn's former intimate partner, has been charged with her murder. China Long was a 30-year-old black transgender woman and dance choreographer who was shot and killed on October 8th, 2023 in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Her life was honored by friends, family, and the local LGBTQ community in Milwaukee at the Zhao NKE Church. Antonio Curran was arrested and charged with first-degree reckless homicide and the possession of a firearm by a convicted felon in China's murder case. Luis Angel Diaz Castro, a trans man from Puerto Rico, studied at the Universidad de Puerto Rico in Arecibo and worked at the Department of Education. He also loved Latin music. His family noted Hector Masonet and Shima E. Jondi as his favorite music artists. At just 22 years old, Luis Angel was tragically murdered on August 12, 2023 in San Juan, Puerto Rico. The person accused of killing Luis is in police custody. Yoko was a talented non-binary artist and DJ. Yoko loved their family and their friends, who remember Yoko as an exceptional, joyful, absurdly talented, and extremely loving and gentle human. Yoko's work included modeling, tattooing, murals, publications, solo showings, curating art shows, and doing live works for different shows and events. Yoko was killed when they were struck by a driver of an SUV on September 19th, 2023. The driver fled the scene. Thomas Tom Tom Robertson, a 28-year-old black gender-expansive person, was working as a cook at a local IHOP restaurant in East Chicago, Indiana, having relocated there from Chicago, Illinois, where he was born and raised. Thomas frequently changed the color and style of his hair, posting photos online showcasing his creativity. And on August 17th, 2023, Thomas and a 25-year-old individual were victims of a fatal shooting in Calumet City, Indiana. And Devani Jure Johnson, a 28-year-old black transgender woman who was a vibrant artist and was born in Tulsa, Oklahoma. She had moved to Los Angeles in order to transition. Those who knew her called her a well-loved and cherished friend and member of the community. Devani was shot and killed on August 7th, 2023, during an altercation with a security guard just one day after her birthday. Camden Ryder, a 21-year-old white transgender man, was 8 months pregnant at the time of his murder, which occurred on July 21st, 2023, outside his home in Winter Park, Florida. Camden had recently posted on Facebook about how excited he was to welcome a child into the world. Jacob Williamson, an 18-year-old transgender man, worked at a local Waffle House and was beloved by his coworkers and even had moved in with one of them about a month prior to his death. According to his coworker's TikTok account, Jacob loved to sing and draw. Jacob was killed in Monroe, South Carolina on June 30th, 2023. Chanel Perez Ortiz, a 29-year-old Puerto Rican transgender woman who was a cosmetologist. She was interested in fashion, makeup, and hairstyles, and she shared quotes from French designer Coco Chanel. She was killed in Carolina, Puerto Rico on June 25th, 2023. Ashia Davis was a 34-year-old black transgender woman from Detroit who was full of joy, devoted to her faith, and a loving dog owner to a Yorkie named Clyde. On June 2nd, 2023, the second day of Pride Month, Ashia was found dead in a Highland Park hotel room. Banco Brown was a 24-year-old black trans man who is remembered as being brilliant and as somebody who made everybody laugh. Julia Arroyo, the co-executive director of the Young Women's Freedom Center where Brown was working as a community organizing intern, said Banco made friends easily and connected deeply with others. On April 27, 2023, he was killed by an armed security guard in San Francisco after an altercation. Coco Dedal was a 35-year-old black transgender woman, a successful rapper who is working on new music and starred in the barrier-breaking award-winning Sundance Film Festival documentary Kokomo City. Tragically, Coco was found shot to death near an Atlanta shopping plaza on April 18th. Ashley Burton was a 37-year-old black transgender woman who is described as a courageous fighter by her cousin. Her brother Patrick praised her authenticity as a trans woman, saying, "The way my sibling moved in life, it was take it or leave it. This is how I am. You can respect it or neglect it, but Ashley put it out there and let that person know it's not going to be a secret." Ashley was killed in Atlanta, Georgia on April 11th, 2023. Tisaya Woodland was a black, high-spirited transgender woman who was protective of those she loved. On a GoFundMe page, Tisaya's aunt, Lizzie Woodland, said she made everyone around her know that they were loved. Tisaya was tragically killed in St. Mary's County, Maryland on March 24th, 2023. Tortuguita, a 26-year-old indigenous queer and non-binary environmental activist and community organizer, is remembered as a radiant, joyful, beautiful community member who brought an indescribable jubilance to each and every moment of their life and fought tirelessly to honor and protect the sacred land of the Weelaunee Forest. Tortuguita was shot and killed by a Georgia state trooper in Atlanta, Georgia on January 8th, 2023 during an ongoing protest. Cheshay Ashanti Henderson, a 31-year-old black transgender woman, was described as a bubbly spirit with a down-to-earth, tell-it-like-it-is personality. She was shot in Milwaukee on February 26, 2023. Maria Jose Rivera, a 22-year-old Latin transgender woman, was described by her immigration lawyer as lively, funny, and dynamic and a joy to work with. On January 21st, 2023, she was found fatally shot in Houston. Zeishi Imani Tuitaho was a black transgender woman who was described as someone who was well-loved by family, friends, and coworkers, and that she lived her life bravely and authentically. She immigrated to the U.S. from Rwanda and was killed on February 3rd, 2023, in Louisville, Kentucky. Unique Banks, a 21-year-old Latin trans woman, was killed in a mass shooting along with her mother, Alexandra Olmo, on January 23rd, 2023, in Chicago. Jasmine Starr Mack was a black transgender woman who was killed in Washington, D.C. on January 7th, 2023. And then there have only been 3 listed so far in 2024, and they are Righteous TK Chevy Hill, a 35-year-old black trans man known to his friends and family as TK or Chevy, who pushed for black LGBTQ inclusion throughout his community, and he opened a full-service hair salon dedicated to serving the LGBTQ community in Atlanta called Evolution. He wanted to help black queer people feel comfortable in a traditional black barbershop setting. He was tragically shot and killed in East Point, Georgia on February 28th. And Kitty Monroe, who also went by their birth name Marcos Lugo, was a 43-year-old Latin transgender person who was known for painting, singing, and having a great sense of humor. Tragically, Kitty was killed in Phoenix, Arizona on January 1st, 2024. And, of course, the subject of our episode, Nex Benedict, who was 16 years old and tragically died on February 8th, 2024. Just to say, if I mispronounced anybody's name throughout, I apologize. That was a lot of names and a lot of diverse names that I'm not super familiar with. Hopefully I got as close to right as possible, but we want to remember those people, those trans people, as brave and kind and beautiful, who were taken from us far too young. Wrapping up this episode, we're going to cover our trans joy for the fortnight, which is that it's a positive update on Don't Say Gay legislation in Florida from Equality Florida. And let me just read this. It's a historic settlement achieved in challenging Florida's Don't Say Gay or Trans laws.
You can really just summarize it as eat shit, Ron.
Yeah. So this has been a move to curtail some of the evils of the Don't Say Gay or Trans laws in Florida. To quote Equality Florida Action, Inc., who brought us this press statement, they said the settlement secures several critical protections and clarifications, including that free expression is restored, students and teachers can speak and write freely about sexual orientation and gender identity in the classroom. They've strengthened anti-bullying protections for sexual orientation and gender identity. Gay-straight alliances are protected. They can't take those away anymore. The law can't prohibit references to LGBTQ individuals, relationships, families, or topics in any educational or extracurricular context. Non-discrimination has been assured that it's explicitly forbidden to discriminate against LGBTQ people under the guise of this law. And You also cannot be punished in any way for participating in or supporting LGBTQ student clubs and cultural presentations in Florida. So that's great news. Basically, it sounds like it's really neutered the whole don't say gay misery. And that's just so good to hear, because that's one of the nastiest pieces of anti-LGBTQ legislation that we've seen in America to date.
It's pretty rough in Florida, but hopefully with this step, other bills will be similarly neutered if they aren't outright killed, as, Florida just lost, 20 or 21 others on the floor?
Yeah. So hopefully this is a sign that this kind of stuff just isn't going to make it. We see it in so many states, and it gets challenged by legal groups, and just a lot of it isn't holding up. You see a lot of it struck down by federal judges. So yeah, I'd say that's pretty solid trans joy right there. I'm pretty happy. I know that things might still be dire in Florida in many ways, but here's hoping that we're on an upturn there.
Fingers crossed.
So, this episode of What the Trans US edition was written and presented by me, Alyssa Steinzik.
And me, Valeriya Martindale, who is also its editor. Thank
you so much to Waritsara Yui Karlberg, who created our fantastic intro and outro music, and who also created a really great revamped version of the theme for the UK edition podcast. So if you haven't listened to that yet, go back and listen to it. That's a great excuse to listen to the entire podcast, really, if you think about it. You can find UA's socials at linktr.ee/ethereal UK music. So that's a link tree with all of her socials and stuff if you want to keep up with what she's doing, which I really recommend because she's awesome. And thanks so much to our wonderful patrons.
Bernice Roust,
Ellen Malore,
Jay Hoskins,
Troen,
Ashley,
Maddie B,
Squid Zena,
Sitcab,
Jane,
Roberto De Prunk,
Rose Absolute,
Sarah,
Sina,
Kiki T,
Derek,
Sky Killayan,
Eric Widman,
B,
Jude,
Monsieur Square,
Fergus Evans,
Anubis a Jackal,
Kamina,
Brandon Craig,
Break the System,
Sean Phillips,
Heidi Reardon,
Ezra,
Sophia the Sixth,
Lentil,
Philippa Teprog,
Alethea Aurora,
Clara Vuljemi,
Amelia,
Corvina Ravenheart, the trans metal DJ from Twitch and VR chat, who will play St. Lucifer for props.
Tabitha Joe Cox, a.k.a. Candy,
Fiona McDonnell,
Torikuso H,
Murgatroyd,
Ontologically Unjust,
Stella,
Cindergosa,
Rebecca Prentice,
Crazy Richard,
Dan Oblivion,
Florence Stanley,
The Cthulhu Kid,
Helen _
Chrissy Jarvis,
Ellie Hollingsworth bought too many magic cards,
Nick Ross,
Alice Chalkley,
Fiona Punchard,
John,
Nick Duffy,
C.B. Bailey,
Gordon Cameron,
Ted Delphos,
Wen Riverup,
Vic Parsons,
Patreon user,
Vic Kelly,
Catherine,
Sabrina McVeigh,
Cassius Adair,
Melissa Brooks,
Karakin 12,
April Heller,
Sophie Lewis,
Alexandra Lilly,
Claire Scott,
Ariadne Pina,
Lauren O'Nions,
Bernard's Pink Jellybean,
Lanos,
and Chris Hubley.
Thank
Thanks
you all
so
for your
much.
support.
Bye!
Bye!